Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again in this YouTube astrological segment. I'm going to be talking about astrology and the shooting death of Donovan Lewis. Some of you may have heard about this. Donovan Lewis was a 20-year-old man that was shot and killed by a police officer on August 30th, 2022. First off, I want to offer my condolences and prayers for the family and close friends of Donovan Lewis. And I saw the footage on this. This happened in Columbus, Ohio, and what happened was there was a police officer that had opened up apparently, I don't know if it was a bedroom door. It was some door that led to a room where Donovan Lewis apparently had been sleeping, or likely had been asleep, and was woken up. And the video footage showed Donovan Lewis putting a hand up, and he was shot by a policeman. And there was some footage that I saw also when it showed where that indicated he was likely shot or in the stomach area, the abdomen area, and one channel had stated it was by his belly button. It was on that donut operator channel on YouTube. And thing is, what he apparently was holding was a vape pen, Donovan Lewis. There was no weapon, and of course there's a lot of controversy on this, whether there was justification in the shooting or not. Some people are also wondering if this was racially motivated. From saying it, I don't know if this was racially motivated, but I think it appeared a little bit impulsive and reckless. I think the policeman may have really maybe could have exercised a little more caution and held back a little bit. It seemed like he was, I don't know if I say trigger happy, but he was a little bit impulsive as far as the shooting. I felt. But what I want to talk about are some natal placements, transits that transpired at the time of the shooting in Donovan Lewis's chart. Now, of course, I don't have a time of birth for him, so I had to improvise once again and do a solar/sunrise chart for Donovan Lewis. And he is a sun in Taurus and moon in Gemini, and of course there's a pretty big disparity between those two signs. You have the sun in Taurus, and the basic sun is the basic character, the fundamental demeanor of the person, somebody that is likely very stable, loyal, steadfast, stolid, persistent. Then you have the moon in Gemini, where the inner self is almost the opposite, because moon in Gemini can be very mercurial, contradictory, flighty, versatile. And sun in Taurus, the basic character don't want to scatter interests, but this moon in Gemini may do the exact opposite. So maybe he had a little balance of this energy, but he also, on top of the moon in Gemini, Donovan Lewis, interestingly enough, he had 4 other planets in Gemini and the North Node in Gemini. So it's a very strong Gemini influence. So naturally, he probably was somebody that had much more interest than the typical sun in Taurus, and maybe didn't quite have as much persistence as the typical sun in Taurus as well. He was somebody at the time of this, the time of the shooting. I've talked about this before, with other people that have had transit Uranus, either close proximity to their sun or the ascendant. It could indicate very unusual, unpredictable things happening in connection with the physical body. The ascendant is dominant in terms of the physical body, but the sun can play a role as well. And the transit Uranus, even though it was not conjunct by degrees by the orb that is supposed to be used for transit conjunctions in astrology, it certainly was not really that far away. It was, the sun in Taurus is like 23 degrees and you have, Uranus was like 17 degrees, I believe, and you're talking about a 6-degree difference. I don't think we could say definitively that a planet, it doesn't feel a vibration, at 6 or 7 degrees from a natal, from a transiting, from a planet that's transiting. In other words, maybe I need to say this again. I don't think we can definitively say that a natal planet doesn't feel a vibration from a transit that might even be 6 or 7 degrees away from it. So the thing about this is, and Uranus is the planet of unpredictability. Um, he also, in his solar sunrise chart, also had transit Jupiter in Aries, and that could be, in the, in falling in the 12th house in the solar/sunrise chart. The 12th house is that house of sleep, and your Jupiter in Aries can enlarge volatility, matters with law enforcement, acrimonious energy. Transit Chiron, also in Aries, in that 12th house in the solar/sunrise chart. The 12th house is a house of endings. Um, Chiron is about emotional ones, but physical ones as well. Aries is associated with gunfire. And another thing, too, is that some people may not see this as overly significant. Some people don't even see Chiron as that significant in terms of the impact it can have on a chart, whether natally or through transits. But the black moon Lilith as well can be more powerful than people may give it credit for. The transit black moon Lilith in Donovan Lewis, relative to a point in Donovan Lewis's chart, was making at least a loose conjunction to his natal Jupiter in the zodiac sign Cancer. Now, the black moon Lilith can have a connection with death and trauma in astrology. In Jupiter, as I've talked about before, is paradoxical, could be very strongly benign and benevolent, but could also have a tendency to enlarge and expand. And it might have very well have enlarged and expanded issues with trauma and death. The zodiac sign Cancer is associated with the home, and also anatomically can have a connection with the stomach. According to at least one source, it's going that Donovan Lewis was shot in that abdomen area by the belly button, and this did occur in his home. Ironically enough, he has his Jupiter, Donovan Lewis's Jupiter being in Cancer. It's in its exaltation. And Jupiter is about the law and can be connected with protection, and the zodiac sign Cancer is connected with protection as well. But transit Chiron was making maybe a loose square to that Jupiter, and that certainly was not helping on matters, because you're having a conflict with volatility, gunfire, in this case Chiron and Aries suffering through gunfire violence, making the square to Jupiter in Cancer, which could be a very good placement, I would say, for matters of protection in your home, home just being at home, and having a very auspicious, I would say, favorable home life. Jupiter is the planet of luck and fortune. It's fortuitous. Jupiter in Cancer can also enlarge issues in matters with the home and introversion and safety and security. And the thing about this was when this transpired, when the cop had shot Donovan Lewis, there's apparently a warrant that was for Donovan Lewis's arrest. I understand there were accusations of him assaulting his girlfriend, pushing and punching her. I don't know if that was actually connected with the warrant itself, but you may want to confer that on the internet. But Donovan Lewis does have Mars conjunct his Venus in his chart, and that by itself can indicate in some cases contentious and acrimonious situations in relationships, and being in Mercurial Gemini, dealing with maybe very mercurial and changeable lovers, or ones that are superficial. And Mars in Gemini can be very excitable, high-strung energy. Hold on a moment, people. Sorry about that, people. I'm back, but anyway. And also, I noticed that his Pluto, his chart, Pluto's in Sagittarius. Though generational, Pluto in Sagittarius could manifest. Pluto being connected with force, and Sagittarius is recklessness, and Pluto's also associated with death and trauma, and this was death in connection with the law. Sagittarius is associated with the law. There was force that I would say could very well have been reckless. In this particular case, directed at Donovan Lewis, and I want to, be kind and rewind. I should have said this closer to the beginning of the video, that the birth date I got for Donovan Lewis was on a website called, you might have heard of it, called heavy.com. And anyway, what I want to state as well, he has Pluto and Sagittarius opposing, based on the solar sunrise time, opposing his moon in Gemini, and that could be very, extreme, distorted, emotional reactions and responses. Though Pluto is in the sign Sagittarius of exaggeration and distortion, and the moon is in, changeable mercurial Gemini, very excitable, type of reactions, and this could really, be, when you look at, it's also could indicate some difficulty in controlling those emotions as well. But the thing about this is, he was, Donovan Lewis. Just a person, sadly, that met, was killed, unnecessarily. And the thing about, this is as well. It's just a terrible, and very terrible tragedy, something that probably could have been prevented if the policeman did not act in a reckless and impulsive manner in which he did. Trying to see if there's some other things I want to see, looking here to see what else I can, point out, of anything of any significance that's connected with this chart. The thing is, the only, see if there's any other thing. Oh, something I forgot to include. Well, another thing, and going back to what I was stating before about, not undervaluing the Black Moon Lilith in a natal chart or through transit. He actually, Donovan Lewis, had his natal Black Moon Lilith at 29 degrees Pisces, and some of you may know that the 29th degree of Pisces is close to the sheet, fixed star position. It's a degree that can be connected with homicide or murder, strong tribulation. I would say could be flooding as well. In this case, he was shot. He was murdered, obviously. And interestingly enough, transit Neptune was not far from his natal Black Moon Lilith at this time, and Neptune has a connection, is associated with sleep, and I think that might have played a role in making the death a little bit more nebulous and unclear, sadly. And really, in transit Mars was also, in the solar sunrise chart in his first house. In Gemini, when he was shot, he did have his arm and hand up, and arm and hand, that of course that is associated with Gemini. And just again, a terrible tragedy, and being somewhat 20 years old, really, and one could argue that's actually before the prime of one's life. Some may see the prime of one's life around age 28, but to have this, this happen at such a, a young age, and also transit Pluto, though not conjunct by the orbs, was not far from his midheaven in Aquarius, based on the solar sunrise chart, and Pluto is associated with death. The 10th house is connected with notoriety and recognition, and sadly this was a death that was, it was something that gained notoriety and recognition. This is a fairly high profile death at this time, and it has been. I guess it's likely viral. The video, the cam footage. I guess like body cam footage. I'm not sure what kind of footage it is exactly, but there is a lot of footage out there, pertaining to his shooting death. And another thing too that that I'm noticing is that he does have Chiron and Capricorn in the solar sunrise chart. Chiron and Capricorn in the eighth house. Chiron in the eighth house by itself can indicate, more suffering, anguish, physical trauma associated with one's death. Being in Capricorn, it's interesting because Capricorn is associated with authority, and policemen can fall into that category. Um, the ruler of his eighth house in this chart, which is Jupiter, falls in the third house. So that's an indicator of a death that would be on would gain news, would be on the news, and the third house is connected with the news that people would be communicating about. And sure enough, that's what it is. And again, that ruler Jupiter is in Cancer, and Cancer is connecting with introversion, the home, and that's where this transpired. I'm trying to see if there's anything else I could add as far as any transits or natal placements that I could talk about that may be associated with his death. Well, he does in the solar sunrise chart. He has Leo on the cusp of the fourth house, which could indicate a dramatic end of life and something that would garner some notoriety, recognition, and sadly, in this case, this one did. And really, looking at it, I don't think there's anything else I can add at this time, and just want to once again state that I do offer my condolences and prayers to the close friends and family of Donovan Lewis. And anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, Edwin Learnard saying stay well.